Hello and welcome to Unclouded Eye. I'm Ashley Brooks.
And I'm Ty Gowan.
And we are your weekly source for the astrological forecast and for some cosmic chit chat.
Could I do one more introduction?
Yeah.
Right behind you, sleeping in the corner, majestic as ever, is Momo the cat.
Yeah, and the way that you found Momo is one of my favorite stories of all time.
Oh, that should be our intro this week.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We had a different subject plan, but we can talk about that next week.
No, this is great. Yeah, absolutely. The garden will be there next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully. If I do everything right, the garden will still be there and I can tell you all about it. So Momo the cat, sleeping in the chair over there, full of fatness. We found him 10 years ago. I was living in an apartment that was near a graveyard that abutted my grandmother's house. So to get to my grandmother's house, I'd walk through the graveyard all the time. Basically grew up in this graveyard. You know, it felt totally comfortable there.
Yeah.
So we were watching Avatar, which is where the name comes from. And a big spring storm was coming. It was going to rain for like 3 days. So we wanted to get our exercise before that came in. Paused Avatar, headed to the cemetery. And we're just enjoying like a walk to get some fresh air. And I heard this and I literally didn't know what it was. And I looked over and I saw this cat coming out of the woods, like coming
Magical
straight
creature.
up to us. Right. Yeah. And back then he had like really orange eyes too. So we called him the Halloween cat. But he came like right up to us. And I have this weird phobia of rabies. So I was not having it. And I was just trying to get away from this cat. And so I knew something was off because I was like, there's nowhere a healthy cat would just be like in a graveyard in the middle of nowhere following us around. And so I was trying to like walk away from him. It breaks my heart now. But he kept like rolling over because he was so exhausted. And like he would just lay down and I felt bad. I was like, I feel like he's trying to keep up and can't. So eventually at the end of the cemetery, when we finished our walk and he'd been following us for like 45 minutes and just looked exhausted, I knew he was going to follow us on the main road to get home.
Yeah.
And I just knew he was going to get hit.
He wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Right. And I was really worried about cars. And so I jogged home, picked up my car, came back and, opened the back and he hopped right in the car.
Wow.
He came home with us that day and like I went out to the pet store and we're like, okay, we'll find his real owner tomorrow, like because he's got to get out of the storm.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, so, you never found anyone. No one came forward.
And I really tried too.
I know you did. I remember you printed flyers. You like contacted rescues.
Yeah. And because I was like, oh, I'll find a dog one day. I'm a dog person. And then it was just like the most dog-like cat came out of the woods.
He really is.
And familiar.
He's been in the background of every episode so far. There he is.
There he is.
Yeah. Nap.
That's right. Hey, buddy.
Mama.
No, he's around right now. Yeah, maybe he'll do something the next hour or so.
Keep an eye out for Momo. He's around and he's round.
Yeah, there we go. So let's dive into the chart.
Okay. So this week we're talking about the last week of June. We have Monday, June 24th through Sunday, June 30th. So this is taking us to the end of June. And June's one of my favorite months. Such a beautiful month here in Maine.
Honestly, it has like the best weather. I still think it's like pre-summer before summer scalds you.
Yeah, exactly. Like the flowers are popping off, but you still have some nice cooler nights with some warm days. That's my favorite. That's why I love like June and September, like those kind of transitional months. So we are starting the forecast by talking about Wednesday, June 26th. Mercury is entering into a trine with Saturn. I don't know if we've talked about trines yet.
Ash, this is my first trine.
Okay, get ready. Trines are a lucky aspect. They are a good fortune aspect. The planets are helping each other. A trine kind of gives a gift of like easy harmonic connection between the two planets.
Okay.
So Mercury is currently in Cancer and Saturn is down in Pisces. So those are both water signs and you're going to have trines. Trines are always between planets that are in the same element sign.
Why is that?
Just because of the degrees that we have. So trines are 120 degrees away in the sky. So planets of the same element are all 120 degrees away from each other. So
it's not even possible for a fire and a water to hit that alignment?
No, a fire and a water would form a different aspect. Yeah, so trines are always going to be between two water signs or two earth signs or two air signs.
Okay, cool.
So that's why it's easy because they understand each other. They're in similar placements. So on Wednesday, June 26th at 2:09 p.m. Eastern Time, Mercury trines Saturn. So Mercury rules over communication, as we know, and also thought processes, the way that we process information. And Saturn is all about duty, responsibility, work. So these are helping each other out. This is great for focus, getting really focused, getting some good work done, figuring out your plan, like working out a schedule for yourself, really good for getting projects done. And it's a little more logical because Mercury is more logical than really like whimsical or anything like that. It's more about logic and connecting details and facts. And Saturn is also more logical and like slow building in its energy. So this is really good for like, you know, figuring out like taxes in a business or figuring out like a business plan that's very structured. But it's going to have you know, a little bit of luck in that arena.
Good luck on your taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's probably people that are filing taxes or like, you know, quarterly if you're self-employed.
That's right. Now's the time to do it.
This is so exciting.
I know,
can't believe
right?
that we're talking about this.
This is going to get the viewers.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's talk about something a little more interesting. Thursday, June 27th, we have a really cool meteor shower happening.
Oh, sick.
So this is called the Bootid meteor shower, and it happens between June 22nd and July 2nd, but it's peaking on June 27th. So this is significant because the last time that there was like a good sighting of this particular meteor shower was in 1998. So it's been a while. And it's associated with a certain comet. So it follows this comet and its patterns. The comet is called Comet 7P or Pons-Winnicke. So it's a specific comet that it follows. So there was actually some worry that the comet was going to hit Earth during this date.
What?
So like years ago, like between 1998 and now, there was some worry that the comet in its pass by in 2024 was going to hit Earth, but then that was quickly ruled out.
You know what? On one of my birthdays, I think I can mess this up. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's coming up, right?
Yeah, it's like it's not like coming up so fast. I think it's like when I'm in my 40s or whatever.
Okay.
There's like a above zero chance that we're gonna get hit on my birthday by an asteroid.
Oh,
or
wow.
a comet or something.
Okay,
like
well,
that.
maybe it'll be like this one, and they'll be like, just kidding.
Now it's going to cause a beautiful meteor shower on my birthday instead. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So they definitely downgraded that. So the reason it's called the Bootid meteor shower is because it shows up in the constellation of Boots, Bottes.
I've never heard of that constellation.
Yeah. And that's right near the star of Arcturus, which maybe you've heard of.
No.
Okay.
You're going to have to tell me where to look.
It's close to Ursa Major or the Big Dipper.
Okay. Get that
So
one.
if you look to the left of the Big Dipper in the sky, you will see Boots constellation this time of year.
I did that for our viewers at home.
Yeah, I'm naming some obscure stars
Just
for
look
you.
to Boots.
Just go find Boots in the sky.
Sky Boots.
So it's going to be visible between 10 p.m. on June 27th and 4 a.m. on June 28th in the Northern Hemisphere.
Now, does that affect astrology at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think that meteor showers and comets do affect astrology. It's funny because there's not necessarily a guide that you can look to like be like the Boots meteor shower signifies this. But in general, I think that meteor showers are considered a potent cosmic event.
Okay.
And especially because this comet is passing so close to Earth, it is going to have a feel for us here. And I think that there will be probably like heightened spiritual energy and possibly because Boots is located close to the Hercules constellation, it's between Hercules and the Big Dipper. And so to me, there's this feeling of like heroicism that's associated with Hercules and like being able to, I don't know, the Big Dipper has this energy of like collecting things, like scooping them with the dipper. Like there's some association within astrology about like collecting or finding necessary objects during like Big Dipper times when it's peaking in the sky. So because Boots is kind of like placed around there, I think there could be some like luck in finding lost objects.
Oh, cool.
To have on your side. That's very random, but that's my personal opinion. I really have no other astrological data.
You heard it here.
Yeah, this is breaking news.
That's right.
Folks.
Look for your lost shit.
Yeah, you're going to find some weird stuff. And you could save the day. Like you could be the hero, like, oh, I found mom's missing ring and now I'm the hero of the family.
Can I ask a question that's somewhat topical to this too?
Yeah.
So last month, early May, I'm messing up my dates now. Early May was that amazing, almost like worldwide aurora borealis.
Yes.
Does that affect astrology at all?
Oh,
Like, because that was
yeah.
insane. What happens? You know, like as in a metaphorical standpoint.
So that was happening because of all the solar flares that were
Right.
going on.
Mhm.
So solar flares definitely impact us here on Earth. They affect technology. They affect our kind of our frequency and our like energetic auric fields. So I think that they can disrupt our everyday thinking, and they can allow us to sort of like tune into a different station.
Okay.
So they can be really good for like getting psychic downloads and looking at things from a different perspective, but they can also throw off like the regular flow that we're used to.
Okay.
So that could be good depending, like if you're a person who loves to kind of tap into that energy, but if you're somebody who's trying to like stay really focused, the technology's all awry, things aren't working out. It's almost like a retrograde in a sense.
Okay, no, that makes total sense.
Okay.
I was wondering that while I was staring up at it, being like, one, what did our ancestors think? I would have absolutely thought a god was eating us. And
Yeah.
then, you know, like, two, like nowadays, like we're doing this podcast, like what, you know, like what effect would that celestial event that's happening literally like in our atmosphere
Yeah.
have to the greater cosmos?
Oh, it absolutely affected. Yeah. Anytime there's a lot of solar flares, there's like some people are really affected by solar flares, especially people like me who have a lot of Leo in our charts because it's the sun. So there's going to be a lot of energy. Like you're going to find that you have like really heightened energy. Like you're like just kind of on top of your game, or you're super drained. One of the other.
How did you feel?
I noticed it from day to day. Like there were a couple days where I was just getting everything done, had so many ideas coming in, and like was somehow getting everything in my life like checked off, like all the boxes. And then the next day I like had to sleep in till like 10.
It's like,
you know,
Anakin, you burnt yourself past your reserve type of thing.
Yeah. So I think the solar flares definitely impact for sure.
Super sorry to pull
No.
you. Yeah,
that's on topic.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Friday, June 28th, we have Mercury square Chiron. Remember Chiron?
Out there in between
Saturn.
Saturn and Uranus.
You got it. Yeah.
It's a planetoid.
It is
what I've been told.
It's a dwarf planet or a planetoid. It's same size and
But not on this podcast.
No.
Because we raise them up to planets.
Yeah.
Because we don't like labels like that.
Exactly. Chiron, you matter to us.
That's right.
So Chiron is known as the wounded healer in astrology, and Chiron in Greek mythology was the centaur.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about Chiron?
I know the centaur was the Minotaur was the center of the labyrinth, right?
Yes.
Does that play into here at all?
I'm not sure.
They guard treasure.
Yeah.
Like they basically, if you're unworthy, you would never make it to the center of the labyrinth.
Yeah. So he's different because he's a centaur, but
Minotaur. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, so scratch that.
that's
from the
very,
podcast.
it's interesting though.
Okay.
But yeah, so Chiron was a physician and he had a chronic wound as well. So he was basically cursed to feel pain for the rest of his life, which is so sad. But he didn't let that stop him from helping other people or other beings. So he was known as the wounded healer.
I love that.
Yeah. So Chiron in the sky is representative of our things that we might be self-conscious about, like maybe things that we feel are different from other people, but they're actually what make us special and what makes us most able to help other people in the world. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's why we promote Chiron up to planet status, because they deserve it.
Chiron absolutely deserves it. I am a huge supporter of Chiron. You are going to hear no Chiron hate on this podcast.
We only want Chiron love here. So if you are not a lover of Chiron, just close out of your browser right now.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. You don't deserve Momo in the corner.
So Friday, June 28th at 1:58 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Mercury, which is in Cancer at 23 degrees, squaring Chiron in Aries. So this is going to call our attention because it's a square, a little tense. We might find that our thoughts are maybe not as kind to ourselves as we want to be. We could be a little more self-critical, a little more self-conscious. And so this is a really good day to try to remember this energy and be a little gentler with yourself. You don't have to get it perfect. And remember that just because the way you do something or think about something is different, it doesn't make it wrong. Maybe there's a special gift within that somebody else really needs to hear.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Be
So
kind to yourself.
exactly. Because this is all about like the mind and process, how we communicate. Like you might be finding that you're double checking what you said or like going back over old conversations, being like, why did I say that?
That's every day, Chiron.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. And then the last thing I want to talk about this week is Saturday, June 29th, Saturn retrograde begins.
That doesn't sound great.
Well, Saturn spends about 5 months of every year in retrograde.
Oh, okay.
So it's not bad. It's not good. It's just kind of how it is.
Okay.
So Saturn is at 19 degrees Pisces and it stations retrograde at 3:06 p.m. Eastern time on the 29th, which is Saturday. And it moves back through the sign of Pisces and it's going to last this retrograde period until November 15th. So yeah, this is common. This is what happens. And Saturn is the lord of karma. So when we have Saturn retrograde, I have an analogy that people who have been listening to me in my various formats for a while might have already heard, but I'm going to share it here on this podcast.
Please do.
Okay, so think about Saturn as like the parent who's been telling you to clean your room. All right, clean your room. Get everything, in order, get everything organized, make sure everything's clean and clear. And if you've been stuffing everything in your closet and calling it clean, Saturn retrograde, that closet door's opening and everything's falling out.
Gotcha.
So basically,
Completely understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really all about checking in. And during this time, which, we have 5 months to kind of sit in this energy. So you don't have to do it all in one day. You don't have to do it all in 1 month, even just kind of gradually chipping away at it. But anything that you've been avoiding, anything that you've just been shoving under the rug, mostly related to responsibilities, work, duty, any like karmic things that need to be addressed might come up during this time and will need your attention. And yeah, it's totally up to you. You can shove everything back in the closet if you want, but next year it's just going to stuff
Be twice
out.
as much. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we work through it a little bit.
So Saturn retrograde is literally the earn your shit type of thing.
Yeah.
Own your shit.
Yeah. Saturn, it's funny because Saturn has a kind of a bad reputation in astrology, but it's one of my favorite planets because the more work you can put in, it gives you like these really great long-lasting rewards. Saturn can bring along a lot of good fortune, but you have to put in the work. You have to earn it.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's kind of what Saturn retrograde represents. So that is what I had for you this week for the forecast.
Love it. That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to the meteor shower.
Yeah, right? Booted.
You'll have to remind me that day though.
I
please.
will.
Good.
You'll get a look to boots text that's very cryptic.
Or I'll just follow your Instagram.
Yeah.
The Unclouded Eye. You'll post about it, right?
I will.
Okay,
Sure.
perfect. So this is going to be a little bit different for me, Ash. I know it's only the 4th episode, but I'm going to mix up the format a little bit because this week's birth chart is also like the center of the subject that we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to call the theme for this week the incident.
Okay.
And I know that's really broad, but that's the best way to describe the theme that I want to talk about. And it's mixed so closely with the star chart I'm about to give you that I can't pull them apart and accurately tell this story and have you guess what it's about.
That's fair. Okay.
So the birth date that I gave you was 6/28/1919, Newton, New Hampshire, 1 p.m.
Okay. And this is a person.
This is a person. Do you know anything about this? Is ringing any bells at all?
No.
Okay, so go for it because I have an idea that this is going to be a really weird one, just based on the subject matter and why I couldn't uncouple it for you.
Yeah. So I want to start off by saying this is one of the more unusual birth charts that I've ever seen.
Okay.
So there are so many planets in Cancer. This person has their sun, Pluto, Moon, Jupiter, and Mercury all clustered together in Cancer in the 10th house.
In last episode, we just talked about the importance of Cancer and what it represents.
Yeah,
right?
there's a maternal energy to this for sure. There's a nurturing quality.
Oh, yeah, lands. I'll stop you right there. The nurturing quality is what I want people to remember about this person and not more so than the incident because that's what they wanted too.
Okay.
So I'm calling it out here right now because that's so important that you hit on that.
It's funny because although this is a weird chart, it's also very like graceful. There's something very graceful about it and very soft and gentle. But I get the feeling this person is pretty well known just given the amount of planets that are in their 10th house.
What does that mean? The 10th house?
The 10th house is the house of our like legacy and our public, like a public opinion surrounding us and our career and like what we're remembered for.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff happening in the 10th house. It seems like this person couldn't hide even if they wanted to.
That's so sad.
They were born during like a day after the new moon in Cancer. So there's a very soft energy here. And I think that this person probably didn't like the level of fame that they got.
Correct.
Or, you know, you mentioned something about maybe wanting to be remembered for a different reason.
Yes, and also did not like the fame.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like that would be uncomfortable to somebody with so much Cancer because Cancer people tend to be a little more shy. And as I mentioned in one of our other episodes, they really care more about like being with family and friends and protecting those relationships. And if, you know, they don't want to be the one in the spotlight necessarily, unless it can uplift people around them too.
Correct.
So they have a Sun and Pluto trine to Uranus, which is a interesting kind of quirky element. There's something very like mystical and strange here. Like there's like a quirkiness, but it's like a benign quirkiness. It's not like something that's going to make them totally unrelatable to people. It's just like a little bit like kooky.
Could it almost be like predestined that something could happen to this person?
I would say, yeah, because like Sun trine Uranus would definitely open you up to being sensitive to certain things.
Okay.
And Pluto trine Uranus is a generational aspect. So that's something that everyone that was born that year was like, or around that summer of 1919 would have had. But because that was in their 10th house and Uranus is down in their 6th house, it was definitely affecting like their public destiny.
Okay.
They were known for the weird thing.
Yes.
Which if they're appearing on this podcast, okay, like that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
So they have a Venus-Saturn conjunction. It seems like people with this tend to have really long-lasting relationships in their life. Their relationships are really strong and powerful and potent, and they tend to not be like fluctuating a lot. Like whereas the last episode we talked about how that person maybe had a lot of different relationships. This is like solid, more like going to be loyal to my friends and family forever type of thing.
This person is known coupled together as a title with someone else.
Okay. So then they have Venus sextile to Mars, which is really like a beautiful, gentle aspect. This person clearly had like a very big, open heart. They loved very deeply. But with that sextile to Mars, they were also not afraid to like fight for what they wanted, fight for other people, like an advocate maybe.
Wow.
Okay.
You're doing it again, or the stars are doing it and you're just reading it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the sun and moon in Cancer, Libra rising, just such a gentle soul. There's like a gentle, beautiful grace. And I do have to say, this person has no squares or oppositions in their chart. So they have a lot of conjunctions. There's a lot of powerful energy here, but nothing actively working against them.
Okay. Ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you just read the astrology chart for Betty Hill of the Betty and Barney Hill incident, which is also the topic.
Wow.
This was like crazy to read about. I learned so much more about her life, which was what, again, she wanted this to be focused on, more so than the abduction incident.
Did you know that they were neighbors to my dad when he was growing up?
No?
Yeah, when my dad was 5, he lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he lived on the same street as the Hill family.
That's insane.
Yeah, he has like vague memories of seeing them because they were like kind of known around town. Like this was before it was like around that time though. Like he lived there while that happened.
That's crazy because the incident happened when they were on their way back to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were going home late at night, traveling through the mountains of New Hampshire, and it happened.
Wow.
Ready to dive in? I've got a lot of notes here.
Okay, I'm ready.
It's a complicated story, but feel free to stop me whenever you see those parallels pop out, especially having to do with the incident.
Will do.
So Betty was born as Eunice Elizabeth Barrett, which is helpful to know when trying to find her biography information because I was just typing Betty the whole time. Like,
yeah.
Of course, I'm not finding anything.
This baby wasn't born Betty.
Yeah, baby wasn't born. What is that? Is that a reference?
No, I just said it.
Oh my God, there's a t-shirt for our show.
This baby wasn't born Betty.
She was raised in rural Kingston, New Hampshire, which I think is actually where my grandmother comes from now that I think of that. And she went to the University of New Hampshire, graduating with honors. I'm highlighting the stuff because this is what was important to her life. The incident was one night in that she couldn't escape, okay?
Yeah.
So she also attended graduate school before moving into a career as a social worker where she helped train foster parents adopting new families.
Such Cancer energy.
It's just not the nicest thing you've ever heard.
Nurturing, loving lady.
She and her husband, Barney, were also avid social activists, and Betty fought for human rights throughout her entire life, even after her husband, who was African American, passed away. So like that again is what she wants her life to be remembered for. Like I read so many articles that said Betty Hill is an activist, and this story happened.
Well, take that with you, everyone. There's so much more to Betty.
There is so much more to Betty.
She wasn't born Betty, but she made
grew
the
up
most
into
of it.
become Betty. So in 1979, she did a story with Boston Magazine citing that her social work is what she wanted to be remembered for. She is not just a woman who sees UFOs. Betty's family described her as kind, witty, generous, and that's why I wanted to highlight this part of her chart before we get into the incident right now.
She must have, just looking at her chart, she must have hated the attention she got for that.
She hated it, but also understood that it was important because I think during the 60s, there were a lot of claims of abductees. It seems like that through the 80s, there was a big spike.
For sure.
And this sounds awful, and I'm not trying to demean other abductees, of course, at all. But based on Betty's background and her basically position in life and her skills and what was important to her, I would say also her not wanting this so badly, that's why people listen to her more almost.
Right.
You know?
Well, a lot of the time people that come forward, they're, accused of wanting the attention for money or whatever, which, isn't always the case.
No,
but
Betty wanted it to go away, but did tell her story.
Right.
Even somewhat reluctantly. So let's talk about her story, okay?
Yes.
So it's September 19th, 1961. It's around 10:30, and Betty and Barney Hill are traveling home from vacation on rural Route 3, which runs between the mountains of New Hampshire. If you've ever been on Route 3, have you been to the abduction site?
I haven't been to the site, but I have been to that area, yeah.
So me, our producer, Carol from Haunt Me, Erin, and then Carol's child Layla all went a couple years ago.
Oh,
there's a
so
mile
cool.
marker sign of like where it happened.
Wow.
And it is rural. Like it was like very much you felt like you were in the middle of nowhere when you're traveling through those mountains.
Yep.
So they stop at a rest stop to let their dog out, and they realize that this light that they've seen moving erratically through the sky is still darting around. And so they monitor this. Like, this is not something that just happened. This happened over the course of what seemed like an hour. So Betty describes the light that she saw as saucer-like. It was covered in multicolor lights, and Barney first dismissed it as some kind of peculiar commercial airline. They continue their journey, and they're heading home to Portsmouth, which is still hours away, and the object continues to pass between mountaintops. So it's following them almost, but following them from ahead. It travels then a distance further ahead and descends down next to the car when they approach a town called Indian Head. Barney describes seeing in front of the car 8 to 10 humanoid figures watching them from windows within the craft. And he said that he interpreted what they were trying to portray to him as stay where you are and keep looking at us. And that like gave me chills when I read that.
That's interesting. That kind of corresponds with some other abductees who say that these beings like kind of telepathically communicate.
That's what he was saying too.
Yeah.
And do you know what missing time is? Have you ever heard about that?
I have, yeah, where you feel like only a few minutes go by, but maybe an hour or two did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And weird stuff happens, like that prove that time had passed without you. And this happens to Betty and Barney Hill. And this is interesting because when they are interviewed separately, their stories match and the time doesn't match. So they realize when they get home that this is all that happened to them that night, right?
Yeah.
What they remember. So when they get home, that's when it gets weird because they realize that they've been driving straight home besides that weird moment that happened, and they got home much later than than they thought. So I calculated this. It's 170 miles between where they were coming from in Portsmouth along Route 3. And they arrived home 3 hours later and cannot account for 35 miles of their journey.
Oh, wow.
After that stop where in Indian Head, there's a gap there. And they both realize that they don't really know what happened between Indian Head and, God, I forgot the name of it, but it's 35 miles away.
That's a pretty significant chunk.
Yep, they're just driving. Their memories, they're just driving home. So they're unpacking and they realize that both of their watches aren't ticking anymore. Mm-hmm. We don't have digital watches, obviously. So they're
analog.
And they can't get them repaired. That for whatever reason, they won't tell time. They won't move forward.
Wow. It's like radiation or something, right? Like
it gets weirder.
Okay.
Barney, her husband, I should say, realizes that the binocular strap that he was using to view the craft from when they took their dog out is ripped. Betty's shoes are scuffed and her dress hem is torn. She never left the car. And this is interesting. The dress, this part of the story is so believed by scientists and investigators that the dress is actually in. I think it's like in research currently, and it went undergone chemical testing and forensic testing to back up the story.
What did they find?
Found nothing abnormal.
Okay,
of course. And so, however, they both described that they felt incredibly unclean when they got home. And before they decided to unpack the rest of their luggage, they both took a shower and checked themselves over and didn't find anything wrong. But they had this instinct to look like something was very wrong.
That must have been so disorienting.
And then they decide to do something that's really cool. They both talk to each other about what happened the night before and decide to draw out what they saw before they forget it in case someone might find it interesting in the future.
Wow. They did like all the right things, like the things that you should do if you experience something like that.
Exactly. They focused on it very, I would say logically.
Yep.
And to the point where about a month later, because they're still shaken about what had happened before that, they file a report to the U.S. Air Force and the NICAP, which is oddly taken seriously for that night. And that's when the investigation begins. Have you read about the hypnosis tapes?
A little bit.
So during the hypnosis, they were both, I think it was regression hypnosis, to put them back in the night of when that happened.
Oh, that's so interesting.
The most interesting thing is they were interviewed separately for this technique and their stories match, which is neat because theoretically you're talking to the subconscious then, so like it's harder to pull out a lie unless you had your stories very well aligned. And that's really not what these people were all about.
Yeah, you're getting into like that more authentic, vulnerable part.
So in that vulnerability, they both individually recount that their car actually stalled when the craft approached and they weren't able to drive anymore. They remembered being abducted, observed in totality as their human form, and their car was released 35 miles further down the line. They didn't drive that distance, is what the story goes. They then were able to create star charts that have since been overlapped with 3D models that line up with the Zeti Reticuli star system, which is 39 light years away and could not have been as accurately described from a vantage point of Earth.
So were they shown those by the beings?
Or taken away quickly, faster than light travel type of thing.
Wow, okay.
So I would highly recommend people, if they want more information on this, go listen to those tapes, go find them. It's incredible. We'd be here. This would be the whole season of this podcast if we went into it. But basically, some details, like the minor stuff differed in their accounts. But for the most part, they described the imagery that they saw, the shape of these alien forms, and their experience almost exactly. And then they had all those weird things that I told you about physically strange with them afterwards. And the rest of Betty and Barney's life, unfortunately, and I don't want to draw a connection, right? He had an aneurysm, I think in 1969, and she never remarried, I don't think.
That's the Venus conjunct Saturn, like being loyal to your loved ones.
And their causes, too. Because she, again, I want to end this off, is that even after her husband passed away, she fought the injustices of the American 60s with poise and calm and an educated approach to how she wanted to change civil rights in America.
What an icon.
Exactly. So Betty Hill, civil rights icon, focus of the incident from that September night.
Wow. That was a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
And thank you for doing her chart. And I know this is a different format from what we've been doing, but I just didn't think it felt almost a little bit too gimmicky to Betty to do it the normal way.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you didn't too, because going into it being like aliens, I might have kind of deduced what was going on.
Right.
So.
This is not aliens. This was the incident.
The incident.
Cool. So thank you, Ash, for that. I thought that was wild hearing about her star chart, especially where it lined up. Again, more about her as a person and less about the incident, because why would it?
Yeah, exactly. That's wonderful. I feel like I learned a lot about her as a person and things that were very prominent in her birth chart too. So
yeah, awesome.
Very cool. Well, thank you all for joining us and coming along on this tour of the incident. And we will see you next week. We're going to be talking about a few things. Neptune's going to go retrograde. Mercury's going to move into Leo and oppose Pluto. And we're going to have a new moon in Cancer.
Perfect.
Ready for that.
Let's check it out with July.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Unclouded Eye stars Ashley Brooks and Ty Gowan and is produced and directed by Nick Nordfors. Music by Ashley Jane Cecilia and Jay Caron. Our community manager is Erin Cross. Art in our videos is by Dawn Aquarius. Unclouded Eye is presented by Haunt Me.